Here we go. To ensure a high quality recording, all attendees are encouraged to mute your mic. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar. Our presenter, Bob, is the director of the CPS HR Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement. Bob is a past assistant vice chancellor and director of HR for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, published author and national speaker. He has been recognized as a Public Official of the Year by Governing Magazine, the highest individual achievement awards from IPMA HR, and the National Association of State Personnel Executives, as well as International Public Management Association for Human Resources. Now, without further ado, we'll turn it over to Bob. Bob's everything okay over there? Let me know if you need any help in the chat. And yes, waiting to answer your question. The session is being recorded and you will be able to download the slide deck from the webinar website, which I will post at the end in the chat, and same for the recording. So yes, it will be available. There we go.
Can you see the presentation?
Yep, all good.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, Marissa. And welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you. We have folks from all over the country, so it's either good afternoon or good morning, but whichever, we're very happy to have you with us to talk about attracting, retaining talent in the new world of work. But before I get into the content, I want to say that most important, I hope all of you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. I want to start by saying I believe the biggest challenge facing public sector organizations, really at all levels, federal, state, and local, is attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining talent. Now, sometimes when I say that, particularly when I'm talking to groups that are not all HR people, I kind of get some funny looks and raised eyebrows. But really, in government and CPS HR, we are an independent and self-supporting government agency ourselves. So just like the organizations that we work with, about 1,200 of them across the country, who are public servants, we are also public servants. And in government, our ability to succeed depends almost entirely on our level of talent, having the right people with the right skills in the right places at the right time. We can have great policies, terrific ideas, leading edge technology, but if we don't have the people to deliver on those ideas and those policies and manage that technology, we can't succeed. And of course, for the last 2 years, COVID-19 has affected everyone in the workforce, not just at work, but also at home. And in the workforce, perhaps the most dramatic change has been the increase in remote work. And we talk a lot about the challenges in technology, about making sure that people can work remotely effectively, but there are also challenges around well-being, performance, productivity, and engagement. And I know that many public sector employees can't work remotely, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the presentation, but many are. And while many see this surge in remote work as kind of a short-term response to a national or even international emergency, we believe, and others do as well, that it is much more than that. It is actually a long-term permanent evolution in the world of work. And we see that in the so-called Great Resignation, which we like to think of as the Great Reassessment. People are leaving their current jobs. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that. So the challenge for us, particularly in government, is how to attract and retain in this new working environment. And that's what we'll talk about. So I want to cover 3 things. I'll describe to you how we see this new world of work. Then we'll talk about employee engagement, because really the way that organizations, including in government, can attract and retain is to create a high level of engagement. In other words, create the kind of environment that enables people to feel good about what they're doing, feel like they're making a difference, and therefore we can attract talent and also retain it. And then how do we build engagement? Well, we do that by creating a positive employee experience, and we'll talk about what that means and how to do it. So those are the three areas that we'll cover. And as Marissa said, happy to take questions at the end. And if we have more questions we can handle, I'm happy to respond offline to you as well. So I'm not going to do all the talking. Let's involve you. So we have a poll question. Attracting and retaining talent is a major challenge in my organization, and we would like you to respond across these 5 categories, and then we will see how the responses play out. We'll take about a minute to do this. Okay, about 15 more seconds. Getting a lot of responses. Okay, so 30% strongly agree, 51% agree, so 80%, 81% agree with the statement. 13% are in the middle, neither agree nor disagree, and 7% disagree. So just as we see nationally, our group today is also experiencing the challenge of attracting and retaining talent in your organizations. Let's talk a little bit about this new world of work. What does it mean? As I mentioned earlier, we believe, and we're not the only ones who are saying this, a permanent evolution in where and how we do work. Even folks who are not able to work remotely, they are seeking increased flexibility. That's the employee expectation. Employees are reevaluating their priorities. We like to think of it as the great reassessment, even though it's popularly known as the great resignation, and we'll show you some data around that as well. And of course, that means more competition to not just attract, but also to retain talent. Demographic changes. The most recent census, 2020, for the first time in the history of the United States, going back literally to 1790, the number of white Americans actually declined. So we are undergoing dramatic demographic changes. And what that means is diversity, equity, and inclusion are no longer just the right things to do, even though they are a business imperative. And we also think most organizations are having to manage a bifurcated workforce. Employees who are able to continue to work remotely, maybe only part-time, but still maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And that is the expectation versus those employees, especially in the public sector, who must continue to report to their work sites. Police, fire, healthcare, public works. These are people who cannot phone or video it in. They have to continue to report. And those two groups of employees have different needs and interests. We need to understand them and do everything we can to meet them. So some data. Once again, in February, 4.4 million workers quit US economy, the 9th month in a row of record exits as the pandemic, as you can see, continues to make people rethink what they want out of work and life. Quits in state and local government have increased during this period. Currently, or at least in February, 924,000 vacancies across the US in state and local government. And look at this data point. 52, according to a recent national survey, 52% of employees in the public sector say they are inclined to leave their jobs. So as someone said, speaking to a group of government employees, if you're not thinking about leaving, the person sitting next to you is. Really some astounding numbers here. Here are some headlines from various publications. I took a couple of hours to look through online some of these publications to find out what the media were reporting. And here are just some of the headlines. Great resignation is really the great discontent. Americans are done with 5 days a week in the office. It's not a labor shortage, it's a great reassessment. Someone wrote in to a business writer, why is everyone quitting? And how do I know whether it's my time? National Association of State CIOs says government remote work is here to stay. Look at this, desperate US cities pitch Wall Street style sign-on bonuses. If you want to become a police officer in this one city, you will be eligible for a $15,000 bonus. Think about that, $15,000 bonus. And on the bottom, great resignation is here. What can businesses or government do to keep their workers? Which is what we're here today to talk about. Another area is benefits. This is from the Washington Post. You can read the headline. Employee benefits have transformed during the pandemic. And the article went on to describe some of these benefits. Of course, expanded employee assistance programs, including online counseling. But employers are providing things like babysitters, pet adoption fees, monthly food care packages, pizzas sent to homes, gym memberships, virtual events like cooking classes, group yoga, auctions, waste management company, which competes head-to-head in many municipalities for talent, is now providing not just its employees with scholarship opportunities, but family members of its employees with scholarship opportunities. And of course, we know in government, we can't provide all of these kinds of kind of exotic and expensive benefits, but there are things we can do, including expanding EAP. One of the organizations we work with has been providing its employees with tutoring services for their kids, understanding that during COVID-19, their kids were falling behind because they were going to school remotely, and they were helping out by providing tutoring services. So really a creative way to help our employees deal with the last 2 years of the pandemic. Another thing that we need to be mindful of is retirements. A lot of the folks who have left the workforce over the last couple of years have retired. And we've been hearing about this retirement tsunami, as it's been described for, I don't know what, 10 or 15 years. Well, here's some data. This is from Mission Square Research, surveyed a group of public sector HR directors and professionals. And one of the questions was, when do you think retirements will take place? And this is the result. 69% of the respondents believe that retirements are either occurring now, retirement surge, either now or in the next few years. And 8% are saying it's already taken place, and 14% are saying no wave anticipated. But 8 out of 10 respondents are anticipating or already experiencing a retirement wave, which puts a lot of pressure on attract and retain. It also puts pressure on building the next generation of leaders, because many of these people who are retiring or will be retiring are in leadership positions. So given this context, and we could go on for a couple of hours talking about this new working environment, the new world of work, how do we, especially in government, how do we attract and retain? And we believe, and there's a lot of research to support this, it's about employee engagement, creating the work environment for employees and potential employees to make a difference, to feel good about the work that they're doing, to feel the organization values them, and in return, they're going to deliver. And that's really what employee engagement is about. Engaged employees feel good about what they do, they feel good about the organization, they feel the organization values them, and in return, they're willing to deliver what is known as discretionary effort, which simply means they're willing to do whatever it takes, within reason, of course, to help the organization succeed. They have that personal connection between the work they do and the mission of the organization. Someone once remarked to me that when they think about employee engagement, they think of it as the opposite of employee burnout. So that's another way to look at it. So why does this stuff matter? Why does engagement matter? There is a ton of research, decades of research, showing that high engagement drives organizational performance. And here is one set of that data. This is from the Gallup organization. Gallup has a database of a couple of million employee engagement survey scores, primarily from the private sector. And here you see Gallup's analysis comparing high engagement organizations with low engagement organizations across some key indicators. And the one that I like to point out is turnover. And typically in government, we are low turnover organizations. 65% lower turnover in high engagement organizations in this private sector database. State and local government, we at the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement have done a series of national surveys to understand the level of engagement in the US economy in both the public and private sector and what drives engagement. Here are some of the questions that we include in our survey. I can contribute to quality, cost savings, and customer service. These are state and local government employees. And you can see that the fully engaged are up to twice as likely to believe that they can influence things like quality, cost savings, and customer service. And don't we want our people to believe that they can impact these important outcomes? Another statement in our survey is my organization is successful at achieving its mission. Here you see the results. We now break it down by level and sector. Look at local government. Fully engaged employees 3 times more likely, if my arithmetic is correct, and I think it is, to believe that their organization is successful at achieving its mission than the not engaged or somewhat engaged. And that gap, that difference, stretches across all sectors in both the public and the private sector. We also, in our national survey, asked people simply, how satisfied are you with your life? And again, you can see difference. Now, the scale for this question is 1 to 10. It's a different scale. So the difference in the height of the bars is not as dramatic, but these are statistically significant differences. So fully engaged employees are more satisfied with their lives in general than not engaged or somewhat engaged employees. And all of us have experienced over the last 2 years how what happens to us at work affects how we feel about our lives in general. Significantly more satisfied with our lives if we are fully engaged. So I can go through a lot more research. We've done a lot of it, decades of it, but we roll all of it up into this engagement value chain. So improved engagement drives performance, organizational performance. That leads to higher customer satisfaction, resident satisfaction. That leads to more trust in government. And if the people who deliver public services believe that the people they deliver their services to trust them, they are also more likely to be engaged. We think of this as a virtuous cycle. And I'm going to share with you research that I was involved in one of my previous jobs as vice president of the nonprofit Partnership for Public Service. We asked Gallup to do a telephone survey for us. And one of the questions that Gallup asked the folks who answered the phone is, think of your most recent interaction with someone in government and rate that interaction. Not whether or not you got the answer you wanted, but whether or not you feel you received good customer service. And those folks who responded yes to that question, to that single question, also said that they were 3 times more likely to believe and trust government overall. And as I like to point out, when I mention this research, think about how powerful that result is. That means that individual public servants can move the needle of public opinion 1 interaction at a time. I think it's tremendously empowering for individual public servants. Of course, those folks have to know their stuff. They have to give good customer service. They have to be engaged. So employee engagement and both the public and private sector, research has shown, especially in government, where our primary resources are people, the #1 key driver of organizational performance. So let's take another poll. I want to find out kind of where you are in your organizations on the path to employee engagement. So is it a priority in your organization? So let's quickly do a poll. Okay, we're getting a little different distribution on this than we got on the earlier poll. Okay, about 20 seconds. Still getting some. All right, 5 seconds. 4, 3. Okay, so 55% agree or strongly agree. That's great. 24% right in the middle, neither agree nor disagree, and 21% disagree. So for those of you who are already have identified engagement's priority, I hope you'll hear something today, particularly as we talk about the employee experience as the way to drive engagement that will help you. And those of you who are in the middle or aren't, your organizations have not identified engagement as a priority, I hope you'll hear something today that will allow you to go back to your organizations and say, you know, we really need to have a conversation about this thing because it can make a difference in our organization. So how do we build engagement? We've talked about what it is, why it's so important. So how do we get there? How do we build and maintain a high level of engagement? It's about creating a positive employee experience. And those of you, many of you may have read about or heard about the employee experience. There's a lot of conversation about it right now. But what is it? It is about doing everything we can to make sure that our employees' interactions with our organization that impact how they feel about their work and their employer are positive. So the employee experience, someone described it as cradle to grave. I don't really like that description too much, but it's really about when a potential applicant hears about our organization, all the way to when we help them make a transition. And we put together a little model that identifies some of the components of the employee experience. So attracting and hire, onboarding, we'll talk about onboarding later, I think an undervalued way to build engagement, providing resources, training and development, leadership, providing solid leadership, whether it's at the top of the organization, middle or direct supervisors, managing performance, rewarding and recognizing, not just compensation. We need to provide competitive pay and benefits, doing everything we can to encourage well-being, making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are priorities in our organization, and then helping employees transition. Sometimes we don't want to do that, but that's an important part of the employee experience as well. And there's a lot of conversation now about rebound employees. In other words, employees who leave the organization, maybe gain some additional skills or competencies or experience, and then want to come back. Because we know that traditional model in the public sector, even in the private sector, where you go to work for an organization and 40 or 45 years later you retire, is no longer the norm. So if we create a positive employee experience, that is going to create an engaged, stable, diverse, and high-performing workforce. So it's really about a high-performing workforce so that we can deliver services and performance to the people we serve, positive customer experience. So that's our model. Here's some data from a guy by the name of Josh Burson, who does a lot of work in the area of employee experience. This is the business case. Why does the experience matter? Look at the blue numbers and words in the middle, which I really like, because those are the biggest impacts. Positive employee experience, 5.2 times more likely to be a great place to work, 5.1 times more likely to create a sense of belonging, and 5.1 times more likely to engage and retain employees. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to retain talent. In other words, positive employee experience creates an engaged and high-performing workforce. And we often talk about the experience and engagement with respect to retention, but it's really also about talent attraction. And here's a quote: engaged cultures will attract people from outside the organization who want to join. What happens internally goes external pretty quickly. And I'm going to give you some dramatic examples of how what happens internally goes external pretty quickly. Probably all familiar with the job boards, Indeed, Glassdoor. Many of us probably get emails every day with opportunities from Indeed and Glassdoor. And many public sector employers will advertise their jobs on Glassdoor. And in addition to the job ads, these two job boards also show employee reviews. And I just plucked some numbers from Indeed. These are from public sector organizations. So right next to the organization name, you'll see 456 reviews, 10,688 reviews. That's a large federal agency. 237 reviews, 406 reviews, 307 reviews. And here are some, I don't name them to protect the guilty. These are some of the reviews of public sector organizations linked to the job ads. 1-star review: run fast and run far. Oh, that's better. 2-star, intense and unforgiving, political at all levels. Overworked personnel with management disaster. You are stuck in one job for life. And there we are on the bottom. Not a good place to work at. So despite the grammatical problems, I think you get the message. So what happens internally is going to be reported externally. And if you think people don't look at these reviews before they decide to apply for a job, you're mistaken. So do you want your reviews to look like this? Or do you want them to look like this? 5 stars, open, accepting, positive, great place to work, good place to work, cares for employees in the community, great place to work, opportunities for advancement and growth. And I like the one on the bottom. Austin is weird, but working for the city of Austin is not weird. It is great. I don't think Austin is weird. I think it's great. But these are the kinds of reviews that applicants for your jobs are going to be looking at when they see your job ads. And that's going to determine to a large degree whether or not they're going to apply for their jobs. So what happens internally affects how people see the organization externally. Now, how do we improve the employee experience? Showed you that list of activities that go into the employee experience, touch points, moments that matter between the employee and the employer. So how do we make sure that we are providing a positive employee experience? We can guess. We can decide that it's all about pay, and we can do pay studies. I know that's going on across the country. And if pay needs to be fixed, it needs to be fixed. But it's much more than that. In order to manage anything, including the employee experience, we need to collect data, be able to measure it, understand what employees feel good about, and keep doing whatever it is we're doing to drive that satisfaction, and understand what employees don't feel so good about and fix those things. And we believe, and we're not the only ones who are saying this, that the best way to understand the employee experience is to ask our employees directly how they are feeling about the organization and their own experience. We have a survey, a lot of organizations do as well, and these are the categories that we address in our survey. Now, we're very flexible. We'll adapt our survey to meet the needs of our clients, and we've done more than 100 of these with organizations across the country. But in order to understand what employees or how employees feel about the organization, their work, the mission, their team, their supervisor, leaders, training, diversity, equity, and inclusion, even the COVID-19 working environment, the organization culture, pay and benefits, ask them directly, and then take action on the results to fix whatever needs fixing and to keep doing what employees are saying you're doing well, to make sure that we are maximizing the employee experience to drive engagement. So I'm going to give you some examples from primarily public sector organizations of what they are doing to drive engagement by creating a positive employee experience. But before I say that, I always say the following: there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to making sure that our employees feel good about where they are working and who they are working with and the mission of the organization. You have to have data, you have to understand what's going on in your workforce, and you have to take action on what your employees are saying. There are 90,000 public sector jurisdictions across this country, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics has counted them. We know there are 50 states and the District of Columbia. We know there are around 500 federal agencies and subcomponents. The rest are counties, cities, special districts, townships, villages, and every one of those is unique. You know, we're all unique. Every one of those jurisdictions is unique. Different financial situations, different political situations, different labor force, workforce situations, budgetary situations, cultures, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. If anybody tries to sell you that there's one thing you can do, or if you do these three things, you'll automatically create a more positive employee experience and therefore drive engagement, you should look upon that message very skeptically. You have to understand what's going on in your workforce. But we found that it's interesting and instructive to understand what other organizations have been doing. Make the focus on employees a strategic priority for the organization as a whole, not just an HR priority. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I'm in that business and have been in for a long time. But the organization has to embrace a focus on employees as a strategic priority. Some examples. From King County, Washington, where Seattle is located, this is a county strategic goal, not just an HR goal. Ensure that the county operates efficiently, effectively, is accountable. And how are they going to do that? By developing a highly engaged, diverse, culturally responsive, and high-performing workforce. A strategic goal, an organizational priority. Another example from local government, city of Henderson, Nevada. We're proud that we've been working with Henderson over the years. Wants to be America's premier community. How's it going to do that? Must be accountable, transparent, efficient, and responsive, while also fully engaging employees. Proud of its 93% customer satisfaction rate and 90% employee engagement rate. World-class employee engagement, because it is working very hard to create a positive employee experience, including through the pandemic, which I don't have to tell you because you lived it, was a very difficult situation with respect to the workforce. You know, I've been in the world of work for more years than I want to tell you about today. And when I think about my experience in the world of work, I can only think of one thing that maybe affected the workforce, changed the workforce as much as the pandemic, and that is the advent of computers. But other than that, what we have experienced over the last 2 years has been the biggest change in where and how we work in my lifetime. Leadership, 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 leadership. In our national research, on our work with individual state and local government organizations across the country, employees want leaders who are visible, who manage change well, like what we've experienced over the last couple of years, who communicate effectively, who listen, who are empathetic, who understand how difficult it has been for our colleagues who have had to report to their work sites, risk their health and even their lives to continue to deliver services to the people government serves over the last couple of years, as well as people who've been working from home and have had to deal with balancing their work and personal lives, taking care of their kids, dealing with their significant others, trying to separate their work life from their personal lives. Leaders who are empathetic and understand that and are willing to be flexible, who can connect the work that I do to the mission of the organization, make me understand how I am making a difference, and who live the organization's values and exemplify those values. Whether you're at the top of the organization, you're a middle manager, direct supervisor, employees want effective leaders. In the federal government, best places to work in the federal government, which I was responsible for producing when I was at the Partnership for Public Service, leadership has been the #1 driver of employee engagement every single year, more than 20 years, that best places to work in the federal government, those ratings and rankings have been produced. And leadership also means managing and supervising employees who are working remotely. And this has been a tough transition for many of our managers and supervisors who are used to seeing people every day and assessing whether or not folks are working and working productively by simply seeing them. Can't do that anymore for all of our employees. We can't just manage time, attendance, and activities. We have to focus on results and outcomes, which we think is a pretty good idea, irrespective of the pandemic. We need to set expectations around results and outcomes. We need to redesign our jobs, and this might be HR stuff, to reflect the impact of technology and move away from simply listing a bunch of activities to focusing on results and outcomes. And this goes for job ads too. And I've done some looking at Indeed, public sector jobs, and more often, or maybe not more and more, but as often as it has been in the past, they are simply lists of activities, 10, 15, 20, 25 activities. What are they? They're position descriptions that someone is using as a job ad. I read an article, and those of you who are LinkedIn connections with me may have seen my posting about that. Someone wrote, a young former public servant wrote a very poignant piece about why she left government, because she got to the point where she didn't really see how she was making a difference. And then she said, when I looked for another job in government, all I saw was these long lists of activities. The job incumbent must do the following. She said, finally, I just gave up and I got a job in the private sector. Really a sad story. So we need to redesign our jobs and promote our jobs as opportunities, not just to engage in a bunch of activities, but to make a difference. Make sure leaders model behavior. If we're going to allow our employees to work remotely, even in a hybrid kind of work arrangement, then the leaders need to model that as well. They also need to communicate and be visible, including for those employees who have to continue to report to their work sites and appreciate and recognize. You know, in a couple of weeks, it'll be Public Service Recognition Week, the national celebration of public servants. I hope every one of you in your organization is doing something to recognize your colleagues, especially for what they have been able to do over the past 2 years to continue to deliver essential services to the people that government serves. And we'll talk a little bit more about appreciation in a moment. I mentioned this bifurcated workforce, people who have continued to report to their work sites and will continue because of the work they do to report to their work sites, compared to folks who are able to work remotely. I don't know if you've heard this expression, the Zoom mullet, the practice of presenting a polished upper half to colleagues while rocking sweatpants and fuzzy slippers outside the screen's frame. Now, I do not have sweatpants and fuzzy slippers on, but I also don't have a suit on, or suit pants. But what we've seen, we did a national survey at the beginning of COVID-19, several months into it, to try to understand how employees in the public sector were feeling about the COVID-19 working environment and how they were feeling about how their organization was handling it. We got 20,000 responses from public sector employees across the country. We were astounded by the response. And one of the things we found is that employees who are continuing to report to their work sites, the so-called essential employees, were less satisfied across the board with their working environment, with their understanding of policies, with communication from their leaders, from their supervisor, from their colleagues, with their ability to stay safe across the board, less satisfied. So we really do have two different kinds of workforces. This is the report that we produced on those survey results. So how do we deal with this bifurcated workforce? Understand, acknowledge, and address that there are people, for example, who report to their work sites and think that their colleagues who are sitting at home are in their pajamas or their sweatsuits doing who knows what, while they have to come to work, they have to commute, maybe they have to pay for parking, they have to buy their lunch, and they are risking their safety. Highlight the benefits of the various roles. The folks who are on the front lines are delivering essential services to the people government serves. Make that connection. Communicate. Maximize flexibility. Some organizations are trying to provide flexibility to those folks who continue to report to their work sites. Maybe they report to their sites 4 days a week and get 1 day a week to work at home. Maybe they vary their starting and ending times. Whatever we can do to maximize flexibility. And as we bring people back into our offices, maybe not full time, try to explain to them why it's important that we bring them back in the office so that we can keep them and they don't go to work for other organizations that aren't requiring them to come back. I spoke to somebody this week who said when they have Zoom meetings, they are trying to communicate to their employees that they no longer want to see their kids or their pets walking around in the background. And my response to that was, good luck with that. Because if you are too stringent about flexibility and balancing work and personal lives, you're going to be less competitive for talent. Mentioned Henderson, Nevada, 93% engaged level among the workforce. These are some of the things that Henderson has done throughout the pandemic to try to maximize the employee experience despite the challenges of working in a pandemic work environment. So website, participation interaction, articles about wellness and remote work and supervision, on-site wellness, virtual counseling, supervisors meeting, micro training, and then a survey. Ask their employees, what can we do to help you resource and training wise to maximize the employee experience during COVID-19? Onboard effectively. Mention that as one of the activities that goes into the employee experience. We really love to talk about onboarding because it's low-hanging fruit. You know, sometimes when I do these presentations, I get feedback. Somebody will say, Bob, you know, I really wanted you to tell me what I could do today or tomorrow to improve the employee experience and therefore improve employee engagement. I wish it were that easy. And I tell them, you have to understand your workforce. But if you're looking for low-hanging fruit, I think onboarding is one way that we can dramatically improve the employee experience. We want to make sure that when the new employee is ready for the job is ready for the new employee, whether that new employee reports to a work site or is operating remotely. A lot of people will make decisions about whether or not they're going to stay with the organization within the first 6 months. So we define onboarding as an integrated set of activities that begins before the new employee reports to work and extends throughout that new employee's entire first year. We've divided it into 5 phases. It doesn't matter what you do. It could be 3, it could be 7. And these are some of the activities that we've identified that should occur during the onboarding process. And research has shown that organizations that do onboarding effectively, you can see on the bottom, better engagement, better retention, faster time to productivity. And what we like about engagement is it doesn't cost a lot of money to make sure that our new employees have the tools, the resources, the support they need to be successful. And this is not just HR stuff, because orientation is part of onboarding, but onboarding goes far beyond that. A lot of onboarding is making sure that we create opportunities for the new employees to have a good relationship with their supervisor or manager right from the start, whether they're meeting in person or they're meeting through Zoom. So this is really low hanging fruit. So if you're looking for something that you can do kind of immediately, if you're not already doing this, you really ought to consider it. So training and development. We know through our research, others' research, that employees want to build their skills, their knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies. And that is a critical part of the employee experience. If they're not given the opportunity to build their resumes, they are going to leave. And we have to really come to grips with the fact that when we hire someone, they're not going to stay with us for 30 years anymore. They're going to move. We want to give them a good experience. We want to build their competencies. And maybe we can move them within the larger organization and keep them, or maybe we can bring them back someday. And of course, as we've learned over the past couple of years, training does not have to be in person. We're doing it today remotely. One of our clients has provided 2,000 online courses or sessions for their employees. So we can provide training and development opportunities. We can do it efficiently. We can do it cost effectively, and we can do it despite the pandemic environment, a critical component of the employee experience and employee engagement. And it's also a critical component of building the next generation of leaders through succession planning. This is a headline: "The Great Resignation is coming to decimate the ranks of middle management. The C-suite should be worried." Showed you earlier that almost 80% of HR leaders and professionals across the country think that the retirement wave is either occurring or will occur in the next couple of years. We need to focus on training and development that includes succession planning. And we can do succession planning in the public sector by creating developmental opportunities. What else? Be flexible. This is a great quote. "Had to drastically change. People have kids, need to take an hour off to put someone down for a nap or to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." And someone asked me, peanut butter jelly sandwich for themselves or for the kids? I think it's for their kids. Be flexible. This is from Bloomberg survey, the extent to which people want to continue to prefer or continue to work remotely. Look at that, 32%, 1 out of 3, 5 days a week. Only 21% rarely or never. Now we know we can't meet everyone's needs to work remotely, but to the extent that we can in a hybrid situation, we should. Appreciate. 64% of Americans who leave their jobs do so because they don't feel appreciated. And you see some of the positive aspects of recognition programs. It is not just about money. If it's about money, deal with it. But it is not just about money. One of the key drivers in our national survey is I feel valued as an employee. Here is an example. This is from a supervisor's toolkit that an organization distributed, including recognition without spending a dime. Now, this was pre-COVID, so I modified it a little bit. Put a thank you note on department virtual bulletin board. But all of these things we can still do, whether we're seeing our employees in person or not. Some more. Pulling employee aside and asking for his or her opinion, department-wide email, recognition without spending a dime. Yes, money is important if we're not paying our people competitively. Fix that, but it's about more than money. Money is a short-term solution. And connect to mission. Employees want to feel like they're making a difference. Big part of the experience is a great story from National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is why you're staring at an astronaut right now. As the story goes, a group of reporters were at NASA headquarters walking down the hallway. They came across a custodian and they asked this guy, said, "What is it you do here at NASA?" And this custodian said, "I help send men to the moon." That time it was men. Wouldn't it be great if all of our employees, regardless of what they do, where they are in the organization, had that kind of connection between the work they do and the mission of the organization? So we live in, this is another quote, we live in counterintuitive times. Now is not the time to go with your gut. We need data. We need to understand. We think survey is the best way to do it. What our employees feel good about and what they don't feel so good about in terms of the employee experience, and then maximize the positives and minimize the negatives. Because don't stay where you're not heard. We had 20,000 responses to our survey. People want desperately for their employers to listen to them, particularly as we emerge from the pandemic. And our folks maybe have some suggestions about what our policies should be going forward. Don't stay where you're not heard. So key takeaways, and this is an interesting, this visual, I had to look at this a few times, but it appears to me that the mother is doing the kid's work and the kid is doing the mother's work. Now that might not be true, but I had to look at this a few times. So key takeaways, permanent evolution in where and how we do work, not just a short-term solution or response to an international crisis, a permanent evolution. Intense competition. And I know you know that because of the poll numbers. Employee engagement, I showed you some of the data, only the tip of the iceberg, but it is the key, driving a high level of engagement to attracting talent, retaining talent, and a high performing workforce. And how do we achieve engagement? By creating a positive employee experience. Moments that matter, key touch points between the employee and the employer, as positive as possible. We got to measure it. We have to understand, we believe through a survey, what our employees feel good about, what they don't feel so good about, and then take action on the results. And action that should be to improve the experience need to be tailored to the results and the organization. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to understand what's going on in your workforce. And I'm going to wrap up with this. This is from Richard Branson, Virgin Airlines, actually Virgin Industries. Clients, in our case, maybe we could say residents or stakeholders, do not come first. Employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. Couldn't have said it any better. So here's my contact information. I would certainly love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I post a lot. Happy to have a conversation with you offline. We are on a crusade at the Institute to improve engagement as a way to improve organizational performance and to help you, to help clients across the country, public sector organizations, understand how their employees feel about the workplace and the organization. So I'm happy to just have a conversation with you. Call me, send me an email, and I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can. So we have a few minutes, maybe for a couple of questions. I have not been monitoring the chat box, but Marissa, do we have questions? And if you have questions, we can't get to them, I'm happy to answer them offline, or if you have other questions, just send me an email.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, we'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, just be sure to type your questions in the question box in the control panel. So we only had one during the presentation, and it was from Cordell. And it says, what kind of resources are out there to retain employees?
Say again, Marissa, I heard the what kind of resources are out there. What else?
What kind of resources are out there to retain employees?
Well, you know, it's really, the resources need to be connected to what your employees are saying you need to do to retain them. And that's why, you know, we really focus on surveys as a comprehensive way to give everyone in your organization a voice. But there are other ways too. Stay interviews, focus groups, exit interviews. But I tried to share with you some of the ways that organizations are creating an employee experience. When we work with organizations, we do a survey. We also provide them with resources from our resources library, suggestions based on the individual dimensions in our survey that the organizations can perhaps implement in order to improve the experience and improve engagement. We also, in addition to those recommendations, provide resources, to go to your question, checklists, guidelines, templates, TED Talks, other videos, articles, even books. So there really is a rich set of resources out there. And if you want to contact me offline, I'll be happy to share some of them with you.
Okay. And
Anything else?
Nope, nothing else. If you guys have any other questions for Bob, you may reach out to him directly. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up here. So thank you for your attendance, everybody. We appreciate you being here. We will post a link to the recording and the slide deck on the webinar page of our website at cpshr.us as soon as it's available. So hopefully I'll have that up later this afternoon for you. I'm going to post the link in the chat before I go. But otherwise, thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Any closing thoughts, Bob?
No, just thank you very much for your time and attention. And most important, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, posting the link now.